Could you briefly introduce yourself and your role in short drama industry?
My name is Judah Ray, and I am the founder of Butterfly. That is a production studio in Los Angeles, California, out here in the United States of America. And my role as a producer and a creative producer is working everything from concept creation, westernizing, which is, taking IP from international and making it work here in the States, to production delivering everything from light, sound, directors, talent, all the way through completion and deliverables.
And how did you first get involved in short dramas?
Funny enough, I have the industry's been budding here in Los Angeles, and I have a lot of friends that are actors. And so these actors would always tell me about these short dramas that they were getting auditions for. And then after a while, a couple of my friends in my neighborhood would call me and be like, "Hey, are you busy right now? Could I got to do a self tape? Could you come over and help me with the self tape?" So I'd come over and I would work, the scene with these people because I'm also a director. And I started seeing the subtle nuances and I started seeing the formula, kind of like the engine that drove these. And I really, really liked it. I thought it was really cool. So I dove in head first and started researching first because I'm the type of person who likes to learn about something before I get involved and not just jump into it because I think it's lucrative or because I think it's like something that I'm doing already. I did a lot of research and watched a ton of them and started really kind of understanding the mechanics of it. And then once I did, I started shadowing onto sets and finding producers that were making these. And through shadowing with producers and directors, I started getting offered jobs. And from there, it kind of grew into knowing that this industry was a budding industry and that the mechanisms, the storytelling engines were there for what for was. And I've just been sold ever since and just loving this.
How did you did the research?
Well, of course, downloading the apps, watching the content that was already there, a lot of, using search engines and reading articles and, doing research over LinkedIn and looking for the people that were already involved in this. So I can kind of see who was involved and who the bigger platforms were and what the kind of the background was. Because by following people on LinkedIn, I was able to watch their feeds. And of course, a lot of people post a lot of information about what's happening, not just here in America, but because I was following people like you, per se, I would get a lot of information from overseas and international information of what was happening. And through that information, I was able to see what was happening internationally. That, and like I said, when I was shadowing on set, and just being a helpful hand, I was lucky enough to do that on some big platforms, productions. And through that, of course, if a lot of these big platforms will fly people out to America. And so I'd be on set, sitting in Video Village, watching and shadowing everything, sitting there for a couple hours, and next to me would be a representative. Instead of just being shy, I would ask questions. I remember the first time that I really got to meet and talk to an actual representative from an app overseas. And I looked over and she did not look happy. I'm like, "Hey, what's wrong? Why aren't you happy?" She's like, "Oh, this is all wrong. This is not our look." And I was like, "Oh, please tell me more. What is your look?" And she started describing how the lighting was different from, cinema and what we do horizontally in vertical and drama. And I was just infatuated. She talked to me for like 4 hours and told me everything she knew about the craft. And so, that's really how I did my research, was sitting down, focusing, and of course, asking questions, meeting people like yourself, and just being open, being able to offer myself. I mean, look how we kind of met through the whole pictures thing. You just do nice things for people, you help people out, and in turn, they see you're a good person, that you're a hard worker, you take care of what you say you're going to take care of, and that grew into where I'm at now.
What's your
Yeah.
biggest take from?
My biggest take from her was just the difference between what we do in cinema and what is done with vertical drama. I mean, the lighting and the way the lighting is completely different. We're in cinema, we're trying to get, real good contrast, but with this, it's a whole different style of contrast. It's, flat for a lot of the apps and platforms. They wanted a nice flat look. If they do want contrast, instead of using shadow, they use light, and they bring things out more using light. So things like that, she would talk to me about the acting, the delivery of lines, and how, the difference between how we do it here in America, uh you know style and cinematic and all this, and the melodramatic delivery style that is was seen and typically had within this format.
The light is flat. Is it because the client's taste or any data to support that?
Because I'm really big about data. There's a big argument within the industry right now, because you've got Hollywood coming into this that's been doing this for, I like to say Hollywood. You've got the cinematic universe that's horizontal coming into this. So they've been doing their style for so long and honing it and crafting it to be a certain look. And if you've ever done commercial or if you've ever done music video per se, even if you do cinematic and you know the difference between how you light a horror and you light a drama or a rom-com, it's two completely different lighting styles. Every, genre that we do has its own kind of language, not just within the writing, but within the cinematic universe that you're building for that. And you would, once again, you wouldn't light a horror film like a rom-com. So in itself, this genre, which I'm a very big fan of, so I kind of fight for it. This genre has a way that it looks and a way that it's presented. Most of the time, there are some apps starting up that are doing, elevated and grounded, but overall, with the Hollywood look and feel, which we'll just call it that, we'll label it that for this argument's sake, coming in and dictating this is the way we feel it should look, this is the way we think things should be, they're overlooking the fact that this has been going on for almost a decade. And within that, the apps and platforms that have been doing this, they have the data. They've been watching the algorithm on the back ends of these. Like I like to say, it's like the Matrix. They can read it like the Matrix. They know what's hot. They know what they launch a series, what hits and then flat bombs, or what blows up and goes ballistic and gets views and hits and heat and all that good stuff. CTA, CPI. We'll just kind of leave that to the side. I'm trying to keep this really grounded and easy to digest. um they've been for years. So when it comes down to the data behind it, I'm a really big fan, and I believe strongly in what's being made, the formula behind it, the engines behind it, everything that's going on now. Do I think that that can be changed? The data will tell us. We're going to find out, because there's a lot of startups trying to change the system and change everything right now to their own vision of what it should be. Or do we stick to the also data driven analysts that know what sells and what doesn't sell, and then slightly tweak it along the way, like what's been happening so far? I mean, if you look at where this started and where it is now, it has grown, it has shaped, and it's going to continue to shape like that. There's just two choices right now. People either jumping into this and they're going to try and dramatically change it into what they think it should be and could be, or they're going to take the model that's going right now, the data driven model that's successful, the billion industry everyone's talking about right now. I find it interesting because, on just to like kind of cap this. I find it interesting that it's this big industry that everyone's hyped about, this billion-dollar industry, and everyone wants to get into it, but they want to change it and make what they think it should be. It's like it's a billion-dollar industry as it is. Yes, we can change it. Yes, we can see what happens, but I'd like to do that off of data-driven facts and not off of, dreams and wishes and fantasies. That's just how I operate because I like success. I wish the best to everyone out there that's trying to change it, that's radically changing things and adding contrast and adding grounded stories. And, people want to do horror and people want to do, all these different genres right now. And I wish them all the best. And even here, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing within the, formula of what traditionally has been successful and just tweaking it a little bit to where the engine's still there, the formula's still there, how these are shot, how they look is all there, but then you just add more elements into it to bring it into light of a genre to slowly step towards that to see how it'll work. And we're going to see what happens from there. Once again, the data will show us, right?
How will you define short dramas? What do you think is their essence?
A great question. Because there's a debate right now, and I think I'm one of the people championing it because when we talk vertical, first of all, a lot of people talk vertical format. They are coming from a place of what they've heard, the hype in the market, what they want to get into, the headlines they've read. Vertical can be, I mean, vertical has been going for a very long time, vertical format. It could be anything from true crime shows to cooking shows to, like, these are all vertical formatted shows and series. What we do is a within that, right? We do short dramas, microdramas, aka mini dramas, aka danju. You do what's kind of in a way that makes it different, but saying that is the same thing like saying once again horror is formulaically different than a rom-com. So for me, short dramas, which the Short Drama Alliance will use that as our moniker, short dramas are a very specific brand of vertical format. It's it's in that makes it different than anything else, and that's one of the things I champion behind is that engine, that formula. And what I mean by that is, I tell people there's only seven stories to be told. What makes the difference between those seven stories and all the different stories that we have that break off of those are the engines, are the formulas behind them, are what we inject into that romance, into that horror, into that story to make it different. And this is it's anything else. As much as people think it's just turning a camera sideways, the engine in it, I'll just run through a couple of the things that make this different to me, right? The opening, well, let's start off with the episodes and the count and the length of episode, right? Like we're talking 60 to 90 episodes. We're talking minute to a minute and a half each an episode, right? So the actual length of the episode is really important within this short micro drama world, right? Inside of that, you've got different kind of formula that you use. Like my favorite is the opening hook slash hit. It draws them in. You got the twist and you got the cliffhanger. These are very important elements of what makes short drama different than any other format. Like in a theater, in a wide cinematic horizontal thing that I'm filming, I've got all this space to the side to utilize. I've got three-act structure to utilize. I've got story. I've got character. And don't get me wrong, that's we'll get that in a second. That's within this genre. But this genre, and don't get me wrong by saying this, it's just kind of like a little to make my point. Story and character aren't what drive this, unlike other mediums. This medium is driven by dopamine, by retention. This medium is driven by CTA and CPI, by a different mechanic than anything else that I've ever written. And I've written everything from horror to drama to rom-com to series. I mean, I've written a lot of stuff. And the way it works, the mechanics of it, it's what makes me think, will it work with other genres? Will it work with horror where every minute I'm trying to hit them with a cliffhanger? That's a lot of cliffhangers in horror. That's no time for our build up. That's no time for bringing our character, really into it and going into depth about that character so you resonate with that character. We don't really have those mechanics within this. We're really trying to pull them into each episode, hit them with something that keeps them, retained within it, and then leave them with something that makes them have to watch the next episode. It's binge mentality. So all these things, the way it's lit, the way the lines are delivered, the way it's written with these, different mechanics, the way you talk to any editor within this field, they're the craziest about it. They will look you dead in the eye and tell you straight up, oh, story doesn't matter, character doesn't matter. I cut to CPI, I cut to CTA. I will cut in the middle of dialogue if I'm told by the producer to cut in the middle of dialogue. And I'll argue with that person that that dialogue shouldn't be cut there, but I will cut there because that's where the best cliffhanger is seen. Different mechanics like that to me are what really separate this from other genres, and especially within the vertical world. Because vertical, once again, could be anything. So when I speak of this, I speak of it as vertical micro drama. It's a very specific niche that I deal with, and it's a niche that I love. And I do that all the hype and all the industry noise that's happening right now is directly due to vertical short drama.
What do you think is their essence?
The essence, that's kind of funny. I think their essence is mechanics and formula. I think their essence is knowing the human psyche and knowing how retention works. I think their essence is dopamine hits and serotonin levels. I think their essence is an echo of the human experience that, drives to our most basic animal instincts. So far, that's what I believe are the essence of these. And, as I would say, a commercial, and people might, gawk at me about that, but that is the essence. Doesn't mean you can't have a Coca-Cola commercial that's beautiful and driving and makes people feel emotional. Look at Apple. Apple does commercials that move people, used to do commercial that move people, and these are basically, in my mind, the same thing. Yes, I care about story and I care about character, but when I talk to people about writing these, I tell them, if you don't care about story and character, first of all, what are you even doing in this? Like, we all know story and character. We all know arc. Like, those are the obvious parts of this. That's like thinking that you know about the mechanics of a car because you know what it is, or because you know how to work the radio. Like, no, that's just the aesthetics. That's just what pulls people in. And an example, I like to use advertising heat, right? So with advertising heat, to me, if I'm doing a show about, say, the main star is a plumber, what am I going to do heat wise? Like, who's going to want to advertise with this app slash platform? Well, in America, we call it Roto Rooter or like plumber supplies, Home Depot. When we're talking about content that's more geared towards like YA, when you look at stuff like what Candy Jar is doing, that's the kind of stuff that brings advertising heat, like Poppy Soda, like Coca-Cola, clothing brands, music artists, people like that want to advertise around that. And I know it sounds weird that I'm talking about this when we're talking about short drama, but to me, there's two things we're trying to do here. Number one is we're trying to create something that drives people to the platform, drives heat and advertising to that platform. So with call to action, we're trying to drive the person that's watching this to actually take part in the app, download the app, go to the app, pay through the paywall. I mean, these are our number one priorities. Number two, of course, it's important, our story, our character, our art. Part of that is, like I said, bringing that animalistic human nature elements out. That's, of course, done through story and character. So that's still important. But this is where I think, people are starting to put the other before and trying to see if story and character will drive these. And I really don't believe so. I really believe, keeping in mind what our goal is here, to keep them in the episode, to retain that attention, to, keep them next episode, binge watching them over to the app, are things that a lot of people are overlooking right now that we got to maintain as an important part of what we do. So to me, the essence is a little different. Our job is to take what is needed from the platform slash app and produce that in a way, in a look, in a style that fits the requirements of what they need. And that right now, that's where the essence is at for me. Do I hope, and I'll piggyback on that. Do I hope it grows into story and character? Of course. Do I hope that all these elements, get elevated and or grounded, and we can tell better stories with bigger actors and all that kind of stuff? Yes, of course I do. I just want to make sure we, maintain the integrity of what's happening now and what drives this industry now, and not end up, a Quibi where everyone thinks this industry failed, and it wasn't the industry that failed. It's the people that came in and injected what they thought the industry should be and forgot what built this industry, what made this industry in this genre. I think that's very important
Mention about Quibi. Why do you think Quibi failed?
because they focused more on story and character. And I hate to say that, but that's not what drives this. If you want story and character, especially in this day and age, you can go watch influencers. You can go watch. There's a lot of medium out there that will fulfill your story and character desires. This, this is a whole different thing. This drives a whole different part of the human psyche, if you ask me. This is different than any of that. And I sound like an echo chamber, but I'm very, very adamant about remembering what drives this story, what drives this medium. And that's, it can be changed, it can be molded, it can be pushed, but remembering those things that made this what it is. My comparison is like horror film. I'm not gonna ever forget that a close shot on a 35 when the killer's approaching to a swing shot over to the side to reveal the killer to get a jump shot is what made horror. I mean, that's what makes a jump shot in a way. So remembering these mechanics, remembering the rules and learning the rules first is then when we can know how to break them and why we're breaking them.
How do you choose your topics? Where do you usually find inspiration?
Driving back into the fact that this to me is about human nature and about animal instincts. I kind of look at two different things. I look at one, the zeitgeist, what's driving people right now, what gets under people's skin, what do people think is hot, what do people think isn't hot, what's trending right now, as in like, what lifestyle ideas are trending and sometimes glamour and glitz is trending. Sometimes grunge and underground is trending. What advertisers want to, usually advertise around right now is important to me. I will say, as a producer, some of it plays into what we can shoot on budget, what locations we have access to. That does play if you're smart and you want to make these and not just talk about making them. And once again, reverting back to how this industry operates and our budget levels and things like that. These are important things to keep in mind and how much you're going to spend and where you could shoot realistically and what can be done within a budget constraint is something I believe helps inspire these a lot. Also, advertising heat, what will draw in advertisers? Going back to the plumber analogy, if my main guys or my main female or whatever my antagonists and protagonists are? Are they something the character that, advertisers are going to want to advertise around the world that I've built with this person, that's important to me? All these things I have to try and take into consideration when I'm looking at projects. And of course, the number one thing is what is the app and platforms looking for? Because each app and platform has their kind of own style and their own genre and their own kind of quadrants that they chase. So this is a business. So what quadrants are, going right now? What's hot? What are they looking for exactly? Communicating with the platforms and apps and finding out what their mandates are and what they're kind of looking at will sometimes placate into what stories we tell.
Yeah.
Once again, information, being informed, knowing what's going on, not just in the world, but within the zeitgeist of these platforms and apps. I think that's all super important when choosing stories. Where, cinematically and widescreen, it's more I'm trying to appeal to, character and the human experience at its core and how I can take that character through an arc. This is more what works with the platform, what genres of the platform usually do, what quadrants do they usually stay within. That kind of dictates more with this medium what stories I look at or what stories we create as original IP over here. And then, of course, usually a lot of this is recreated or repurposed IP. So what IP is hot right now, what shows are hot right now, what are the number one trending on the apps, and what is the similarities between all those top trending series right now. I always tell people there's two ways that you can create. You can create out of a dream and hope that one day you're going to make this or sell this or get contracted to do so. Or if you want to work right now, what's happening right now? Pay attention to that, create something to that, and yeah, still have your dreams of building something in the future and have that locked and loaded and ready to go. But if you want to work right now, you should definitely be in tune to the zeitgeist of what's happening and what everyone's looking for and the mandates that people are requiring, so you can kind of write towards that and keep those going. Because these aren't like screenplays where they take 2 or 3 years to write them for some people. People can crack these out in a week. I know people that can crack these out in a couple of days. So if you look at the timeline these are built in, we're in a feature if you write to the zeitgeist, right? If we're in the narrative world and I write to the zeitgeist, I will take, we'll take a normal month to a year to write. Then it's going to take you a couple of years to shop it. It's going to take you a year to make it, another year to get the distribution. 5 years later, the zeitgeist has completely changed. But something like this, I can write one of these in a couple of days. We can shoot it out in 8 to 10 more days. We can have it in editing for a week and realistically have one of these made in a month. That's, not much has changed in a month in the zeitgeist from when you first had this idea to when it's actually made. So that gives you a clue to what you should be writing towards, not what you think is going to be happening in the future if you want to work right now, but actually what's selling right now, because that's going to be sold right now. It's going to be made right now, and it's going to come out right now. And that's right. What's exciting about this? We're not taking everyone. I'll cap with this. Everyone asked me why I got into this because I love narrative storytelling. I love being on set and working with actors and directors and putting projects together. Like I love all that. But I don't love it that it takes, sometimes a year to 5 years to 10 years to make a feature. This gives me a narrative form I could do in between that we can do to the zeitgeist. I speak to today's audience. I can talk to the now. I can put stuff out there frequently and be working consistently, which I think is what really people love about this is that consistent work because, we can make these relatively fast.
China, the trend is gonna move by around 3 months because it's a very competitive market. So maybe these 3 months there is some kind of regret trope. 3 months later, change it to another trend. Let's pause for a second. Imagine you are in a crowded marketplace. Vendors selling cakes, jewelries, all kinds of things. And you are one of the vendors trying to sell a story. What kind of story will you tell? And more importantly, how do you keep people stop listening, and actually pay? That's the narrative logic of short drama. I explain this in my book, Short Drama Writing 101. Write what platforms want. It's available on Payhip, Amazon, and Google Playbooks. Now let's back to the video. How do you design your characters?
When it gets down to my characters, I'm all about conflict. I mean, I think that still resonates from the cinematic. When it comes down to characters, love is great, which is another, instrument that I use, of course, you got to have that love within these and that romance, but, conflict is king. How can I my characters where every character has conflict with every character? If everyone's just friends and everyone's just getting along and agreeing with each other and saying the same thing, it can get really repetitive. But when people have conflict, difference of opinion, difference of character, difference of view, difference of world that they think they're living in, all these conflicts, are some of the first things I do when I'm scripting out one of these. Of course, world building's my first thing. What's the world and why they live in it? But when I get into the character, then it's all about conflict. Why does everybody not work with everybody else? How is everybody's viewpoints different than everybody else's viewpoints? And how can and I'll make like little charts of how it fights with everyone's opinions. And this person doesn't like that, but they're on their side about that, but they're on their side that way. When I get into the story, it gives you that good tug and pull of character that gets boring and never gets repetitive. So conflict is my number one. Love is my number two. So I guess how do I build my characters? It's all about emotion from there. My emotional standpoint of how each character's emotional dance plays with each other. That has to be present with my characters. And then taking it a step deeper, of course, within this medium, how can I do my cycles and keep my cycles going and keep my story going and keep it interesting with these characters? So, of course, one of the first things I'll do is I'll break who's my protagonist, who's my antagonist, who are my other characters, and we'll use, say, like romance, toxic romance as our backing, right? Well, for each one of these characters trying to break up the love that I'm trying to build between these two characters, and each one of my opposing characters, my antagonists, I'll give them like five things they do that separates them from what the other person's doing and why their reasons are for doing it to break these two people up. So now I've got my conflict. I've got my reason for having enough diversity within my characters, which is the next thing that I look for to make sure that they keep that mentality going. And I know that doesn't happen a lot within this medium. It's kind of the one way I like to ground these a little bit, is I've been bringing a little bit more diversity into it, where instead of everybody's exactly the same, maybe they're all filthy rich, but they're rich for different reasons of how they came into the money. Some are corrupt, some are not corrupt, some made their money easily, some worked for their money. Just through these simple character dynamics, we can still keep the tropes, we can still keep the cycles, we can still keep, and this talks into earlier what I about. We can still keep that formula there, just grounded a tiny bit. And that's what I'm the biggest advocate for. Is a lot of people want to take this medium and crank it up or ground it really hard and do all these things. I'm like, no, we just need to just tune it just a little bit, just like what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 years, step at a time. And see, I will say this is what I believe that a lot of people getting into this don't understand, that I think the original people that are in this understand, is all these people getting into it see a vision of what they believe this can be, and they're all charging forward towards that. Where the people that have been in this long enough to know that's how you fail, and that you need to slightly adjust things and watch the algorithms and see what happens in the response to those little tiny tweaks. And you know what works and what doesn't work, so you can take it from there.
How do you capture the audience tension in the first 10 seconds?
The hook hit. That's actually one of my favorite parts of doing this. I personally use a couple of elements, either a sound that catches the attention, a line from someone or something. It could be a news headline, so I say something that is jarring, that really triggers an emotion within the person that's watching it. And then, of course, there's just something that's hanging from the last cliffhanger. If I have the right cliffhanger, the hit should be something coming off the cliffhanger. Like if I wind up for a slap in the cliffhanger and it's coming in, as soon as that hook hit happens, that slap's landing. And you're just like, oh, and it pulls them in. The hook, the hit is so important to me because I really believe this is a dance that we're doing here. Between the hook, hit, and the cliffhanger and the twist, the tension. I like to bring in the binge formula, which is you ask a question every episode that gets answered in the next episode, right? Whether it's a question about the world, a question about the character, a question about the plot. These are the mechanics that I believe drive this. So when bringing them in, it can resort from anything I'm trying to do within the episode. But once again, it's usually with me a sound, a line, or an action that is jarring and makes the person go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened."
Mention about the Netflix, like you got a question and answer in the next episode. Does it always apply to every episode in short dramas?
Not for everybody. It's something that I do within my writing. So, I mean, a lot of people like to do it. It is part of the, if you're ever learning how to write episodic and series, it's something that you're taught. It's something really drilled into you over at Netflix. It's just that it's part of binge mentality. These are all mechanics that we use, these little gears and widgets within our machine to be able to keep that retention, right? That's what it's about. It's keeping that retention in a way that the viewer just has to keep watching and watching and watching. And I like this. This is the easiest way to explain it to people. The hook hit brings them in, right? The sound, the line, the action, whatever that is. And even from episode one, from the jump, oh my gosh, what was that? Before they can get to was that, I'm already hitting them with a character. I'm hitting them with a twist. I'm hitting them with some kind of action. I'm hitting them so hard, they're like, wow, wow, did you see what just happened? Before they can get to what happened again, I might already be hitting with a cliffhanger. And they're like, oh gosh, that was so crazy. And before they can get to that was let alone so crazy, I'm already hitting them with another hook and hit, right? What I'm doing is I'm never giving the viewer a chance to think long enough to go, oh, this is boring. Oh, I don't like this character. Oh man, this conversation has been so long-winded. I never give them that chance. I'm constantly hitting them and hitting them and hitting them and hitting. They're binging at that point. They're so curious to get the answer to that question. They're so wondering what that hit was. They're so jarred by that twist. They never have a chance to breathe, let alone think about whether they're bored or not. And so, yeah, these are all the mechanics that we use that I believe, yes, we use mechanics with the narrative. And yes, we do that in cinema, but this is an exact formula. In cinema, we love a good monologue, right? Oh, give them a great speech and let them talk about something. Oh, man, so beautiful. What a shot. What a scene. What a dialogue. What a delivery. That's not this medium. I mean, look at how these are shot. These are shot in a couple, 8 days, 10 days, 12 days. These are shot, and I've seen this a lot enough where I'm not saying everything's shot like this, but these are shot where are they in frame? Are they lit correctly? And did they say the line properly? Yes, yes, yes. Moving on. You know what I'm not discussing whether the character would have felt that way or hey, I don't think I felt my line was right. We don't do that. This is everything down to the way it's shot is down to the mechanics. It's down
Yeah.
to the formula.
So the formula is like maybe 2 to 3 seconds before the audience figure out what's happening, right? So they don't think.
It's not about not letting them think, because of course they're thinking, they're processing. Our minds are like supercomputers that can process things in a fraction of a second. You're looking at everything around you, and your brain is constantly just processing everything in a millisecond. And it's not that they're not thinking. We're not giving them a chance to think about whether they're even, what they're watching. I'm not even joking with this. Like, we're not giving them a chance to process whether they like what they're watching or they like what they're feeling, because they're just in that roller coaster ride. They're strapped in at that point. It's why you look up from these after 20 episodes and go, wait a second, what just happened? And how did I spend $25? It's all a formula to me. That's what makes this genre different than everything else, is that formula. Is that why we're writing these and what we're producing these for and why they're shot and how they're cut. I mean, all this is the driving force behind these. And the story and character are important. We don't want to watch characters or stories we don't relate to. That's why I say when people argue that point, it's like, yeah, no, that's the obvious point. That's the very obvious point. Story and character have to relate to a zeitgeist and to a wide audience. Yes. But after that, why did Quibi fail? Because that's all they cared about was story and character. They didn't have the engine we have. They don't have the formula we have. I mean, you only seen it in the zeitgeist within the last couple of years. And if you're anyone out there that follows any kind of influencer or any kind of show, influencing used to be, hey, everybody, I'm here. Look at this. Look what's going on. Live ish, personal like that. Now, when you watch these influencers, you watch these shows on like Snapchat or, Instagram or TikTok, they start off with the middle, just like we do in cinema. You know, oh man, look at this crazy place I'm at. Isn't it nuts? Check out how I got here. And then they start talking the story about how they got there and showing you those clips up to the moment of what they did. So even that within our zeitgeist have changed how influencers present themselves in their videos and their updates. When you even look at usually the icons for these videos, the icon will be a clip from halfway the middle to the end of what you're watching. You have to click through the whole entire thing to get to the moment that you wanted to watch the clip for anyway. These are all mechanics that have been built within influencing, within, that whole world that have made it different from the original influencers and the original content that was being made. Now it sucks you in more. You're like, oh my gosh, look where that influencer is. That looks crazy. And then they start going to how they got there. You have to watch the whole video of how they got there to see what the crazy thing is they're doing. That's a formula. That's what we're doing here. Same thing. This is a formula now, not just story and character. Once again, it's the difference between horror and a rom-com is the formula. That's it. They're both stories of people going through things, right? I mean, basically, they're both human experiences. Usually, they both have a love story within them. But one is filmed darker. It's, jump shots. It's filmed more claustrophobic and closer. That's the formula for the horror, and it goes on. Rom-com, everything's bright. You're getting both the characters in the shot. You want to see the environment, how beautiful everything is, how lovely a date they're on, and how nice the restaurant is. It's a different formula.
And how do you create character or story that emotional resonant with the audience?
Going back to those two main things, which is emotion and zeitgeist. So I try and look at, okay, what's hot right now? What is everyone kind of talking about? What is the job everybody wants to have, or the place everyone wants to be, or the person that everyone looks up to? I mean, it doesn't have to be a celebrity, like at work, the CEO. Everyone wants to be the CEO right now. Everyone wants to be their own self-made millionaire right now. Everyone wants to be famous right now. Everyone wants to be an influencer right now. Everybody wants to be in love right now and have someone in their life right now. So these are the zeitgeist things that we're looking at, right? And then, of course, the emotions, the conflict. What is the conflict there? And why is my main character the main character of this film? Is there conflict? What is the reason why I care about this character? That all boils into it.
In North America, vertical dramas are still dominated by serial romance. And what other type of story do you think can be explored and why?
Well, that is a two-pronged question. All right, so let's deal with one prong first, which is where we're at, right? Look at the zeitgeist of America. Everybody wants to be rich. Everyone wants to be popular. Everyone wants to be an influencer. Everybody wants to be self-made and self-reliant and not have to have a job for the rest of their lives. Everyone wants to celebrate and party and forget how hard times are right now. So we're looking at the zeitgeist of America and kind of what's going down within it. So within that and the model and formula of what we have that's popular right now, of course, the undercover boss, the toxic romance, the family drama, pretty much the key core human experience stories that everyone can relate to that drive and pull at the heartstrings of, and I hate to say this, but the underbelly of what people feel, the anger, the animosity, revenge, lust, and love, and all these animalistic, instinctual things that we as people want to feel, want to be a part of. We can't help it. I hate to say it, but we drive and thrive off of drama and conflict, and this is just human nature. This is psychology 101. You know, when you look at these things and you look at the world and you understand that, then you can start kind of seeing what works and what doesn't work. And that's why we've been able to take a lot of popular international IP and westernize it to work in America, because in the end, it's a human experience thing, right? So that, both westernizing IP that's already popular there, and then of course writing stuff and new IP that appeals to the American market, while still shot in the style and way and edited into what's popular and works within the platforms and apps pre-existing content, I think is our future right now. Of course, we have our own thriving market. We have a bunch of apps started up, about 350, I think 400 to count right now, which are American apps being built. And I'm sure those are just the ones we've heard of. There's sure going to be probably up to 1,000 apps in America that start up as everyone tries to join the gold rush, as they say. Now, there is a lot of confusion on what this is. You're going to have our people are starting to spend a lot of money and put up a lot of money to develop where this could go. And what that means is, there's a lot of talk of new genres being introduced, which I know we have a horror kind of lane that this is in right now, but taking the romance out and going straight horror. The Latin markets and the novella markets, which are, already soap opera-ish and around that whole lane, can all be developed into this. So there's people that are both doing what I call elevating this, are trying to go more fantasy, more sci-fi, more horror, and there's people that are trying to ground it at the same time, not so melodramatic, more cinematic lighting, more money on set and prop, bringing in, name talent from the, Hollywood cinematic universe into this and bringing in the unions and bringing in all that kind of stuff. To a couple hundred of those apps are going to be vertical apps. They're not going to be microdrama apps or short drama apps. And then you're going to have another couple hundred that are going to be, that, but they're not going to understand anything about this or the mechanics or how it works. And I mean, from what I understand, it's gonna be the same thing that happened in China. You're going to have acquisitions, you're going to have mergers, you're going to have people putting their libraries together, and it's going to dwindle down to a core group of people. Now, what's working right now and what's changing is I don't have to speak to right now because we all know you're in this industry, I am, same things as it's working right now. Where it's going, our people are starting to spend a lot of money and put up a lot of money to develop where this could go. I guess make vertical movies is their idea. As you can see, I'm not the biggest, hottest person when it comes to talking about this subject because I look at it like, okay, so what you think is movies and cinema are dying. And then if you just turn it on its side and film it for a phone, all of a sudden everyone's going to start watching it again. And I really don't think that they understand where we're at right now in the world, in content, and how it's digested, in the new generations that are coming up, like, alpha and beta. I don't think they see the truth of what made this industry what it is. So when I talk about all that kind of stuff, we'll see. I like when we're a production company, if you call us and say, hey, we want this, we're not going to stop you. We will produce it for you and make it in the best alley and aspect and way that you envision it. When it comes down to our own content, like I said before, we stick to the traditional model. We just Americanize the story character and make sure it's westernized enough. Even with our IP, we do the same. If we do ground it or elevate it, it is just like a niche, just a small little bit here and there, just because we've been doing this for a very long time, so we know how to produce quality while, still maintaining the look and feel. That's probably something we should probably talk about for 2 seconds. Well, 2 minutes, we'll say at the most, is I do believe there's a middle ground that you can bring in the cinematic way of filmmaking into this while still maintaining the short drama engines and formulas and merge the two in a way where it's still melodramatic, but it's, quality acting, where we use vertical stars and make a whole new star system out of vertical actors and, people that only do vertical and that's like their genre and not have to bring in big name talent just to sell a project and just to get an audience interested into it. And that we can, elevate the look and ground the feel while still maintaining that engine. Just, really let actors kind of come in and act instead of just throwing it together so fast. I really believe there's a medium, there's a center that we can find that, excels both markets. And I myself, with our own IP, that's what we're interested in exploring.
In China, there are half male-oriented stories and half female-oriented stories. So the male-oriented stories didn't work well in China, it didn't translate. So what kind of short dramas do American male audience like to watch? What do you think?
That's an interesting question because I mean, let's look back at the past of this as a male audience dominated genre, and then it grew into more of an overwhelming female audience that was watching it, and that's when they found that it really excelled and blew up. So finding the male audience and finding that medium between the two is interesting, right? I believe that in the end, it's all about the human experience. and that these core emotions are very important to relate to, you know, both men and women. And sorry, everybody else that's included in that spectrum nowadays. Leaning towards if you really just wanted to bring in a male dominated audience, to me, that's kind of obvious. You got your action, which I've been starting to see more and more entwined in some micro dramas and some short dramas, which is action. Action, of course, always lends itself to a male audience, that, masculinity. I hate to say it, but actual, bringing in masculinity to not in a way where it's toxic, but where you've got, men's men kind of characters, I think would really to a more male audience. I think in the horror genre is going to bring in some more male audience. And I myself, that's one thing I am a fan of. I do believe that the horror genre, the strictly horror genre, will work within the medium. I think it's about just finessing it right and knowing how to not just constantly just beat them over the head with your cliffhangers, and actually be able to utilize the medium and the formula while still using other, small things like jump scares and, shock value to be able to bring in that horror element. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
How do you see the future of short dramas?
I think that we're going to find it a very interesting couple of years ahead of us. And if you've been in the Chinese market, you're going to know what I'm talking about. There's going to be an injection of a ton of companies that are going to come in. A lot of money's going to get spent. There's a lot of excitement behind it. There's going to be the push back period where a lot of those companies start failing. So everyone thinks everyone's going to fail. And then there'll be the true captains that survive that whole, era. I think there'll be mergers and acquisitions in between, international companies and American companies and American companies and American companies, till kind of smaller and to just a few companies are dominating it. Same thing that happened in China. The big question is what's going to happen when the horizontal narrative industry, quote unquote, Hollywood, comes into it, and what they're going to try and do. My personal feelings are there will be some winners in that. There are going to be some people that change this industry and really rock it and come out with things that we never even expected, and genres and form and titles and characters that was just going to like revolutionize this. I think there'll be a lot of people that lose a lot of money that because they don't understand what we're doing here. So there'll be a lot of money lost. There's a little bit of a fear that they're going to come in and change things and kind of. I mean, the best way to say this is, and I'm not hating, it's my industry, I'm part of it, and I always will be a part of it, is, and I'm using the word Hollywood as an industry, kind of blanket, is that, there it was $1 billion entertainment industry that got tanked. And it tanked for a number of reasons that I've watched personally over the last 30 years, being a part of entertainment. And if you ask me, those same reasons that industry tanked, for some, it's just beyond me. I can't even figure out why these people think they can bring it into short drama and do the same exact thing and not tank this industry. And don't get me wrong, I believe we should have stars, but I think they should be vertical, microdrama, short drama stars. And we don't need Brad Pitt in the short drama world. It's just it budget wise, it just doesn't work. Yes, I do believe there should be unions in our business, but they should be vertical unions. We don't need SAG and we don't need IETSE and those companies coming in, because what no one understands is what I see on the production side, because I've talked with the apps and platforms, is what these really cost. People go, oh, they're 150, 200,000, 250, 300 right now, US. They're so small budget. They're not looking at the other side of this, the advertising campaigns that go behind these things and how that works. So they're high budget productions when you put the whole thing together. So when you start putting more weight and more production costs on the front end, you're taking away from that marketing back end. That's just how it works in business. I want this to blow up and be everything it can be. But from my understanding from the people that have been doing this for about a decade now, that formula is not going to work in this world. That's just from what I've heard. I'm an echo chamber. It's not my opinion. I, once again, would love to see all kinds of great things happen. I'm just looking at what's been told so far. And from that echo chamber, from different apps and platforms, from representatives that told me, the budgets you Americans are talking about, we don't see how it's going to be possible to keep everything running fluently and develop these as fast and as quickly and as many as you need to keep the platforms running with the type of advertising that you need behind it to keep the heat going so that you get the hits, the blah, 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 blah. It's all, we both hope, right? Like, I like money. I like getting paid more. Don't get me wrong. But if short dramas start taking a year to make, and there's just once again you're not hitting the zeitgeist, you're not hitting that window of when the opportunity is because your relevancy is to whatever it's the trope or the time that you're talking to, you're ruining all these parts of this formula. So will it work without those? Will chocolate chip cookies still work without the sugar in them? Can you substitute honey? I don't know. We'll find out. Will it still be a good cookie? And that's what I tune myself into is what's happening right now, what's hot right now, what sells right now. Because once again, I'll make one of these in a month. And if it changes in a month, guess what? I'll write one in that month to talk to that zeitgeist. So I don't really have a problem with this doing, and I wish everybody the best that is getting into this. Like God bless you. But for me, I'm a business here. Butterfly is a production company that facilitates what platforms and apps need for their current libraries to be able to put on right now and, CTA and CPI the hell out of them and get people to go past paywalls and come to their apps and platforms. That's my job.
Do you have anything else you want to share?
I guess just the last thing I would say is just be bold, be daring. Just because I write to the zeitgeist doesn't mean that I don't push for a tomorrow where character, story, and genre can change and all that stuff matters. Especially if you're in America, I would say do your research. Just know why this was made and how it was made and have respect for that. Because especially if you're dealing with international people, when you come in and you just blow, your mouth about what you think it should be and how everything, is bad the way it is and all that stuff, you're disrespecting people that built this, that, worked hard to grind and out there to, build something that you're becoming a part of and that you want to develop into something else. So just remember that, know that, have respect for that. Know what you're talking about when you're talking to people that have been doing this for years now, about what you think and feel, know the rules and then have fun breaking them. But know the rules. So if you're watching this, you're already in the right lane. You're already going down the right path. You're learning. You want to, get information. You're doing the right thing. So I'm already talking to the right people here. But keep on this path. Keep as a part of the Short Drama Alliance. Get to know people. Network. Find information. Know your craft. And I'd love to work, meet, and be on set with all of you someday. Good luck with your projects and your endeavors.